Elevate yourself. Empower others. Welcome to Coach Approach Podcast.
Welcome back to the Coach Approach podcast. Today we have a truly special guest, David Klaasen, director at Talent for Performance, a leader in brain science, behavior change, leadership development, and one of the UK's leading experts on ownership culture. He has 20 plus years of experience helping organizations create clarity, align people, build accountability, and shift behaviors in a way that actually sticks. David, welcome to the show. It's an honor to have you here.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind of you. Very nice words. Very flattering, but yeah, thank you.
Okay, I'd love to start with something central to your work, your formula: clarity X people equal performance.
Right.
Can you explain why clarity matters so much and what happens inside an organization when leaders lack it?
It's a really good question. And it became a theme from working together with my business partner, Ali Gibbons, over the last, 20 years, really, that a lot of the problems we see is due to a lack of clarity. And that could be a lack of clarity of purpose, of vision, of what's important, our values, and above all, a lack of clarity of the strategy. Because a lot of the leaders may have loose ideas or even maybe concrete ideas of what they want to do, how they see the future, and what they see as success. They're not communicating it with people enough. And often the translation piece is really important as well, so that maybe there is a strategy and it might even be written down in a document, but it's not discussed in a way that managers can then understand how it directly relates to them and their team. So the managers can translate that into something meaningful for the people. So for us, clarity isn't just about a clear statement of what is required, what success looks like, what the results required are, but also translating that into meaningful language that people can understand. And
Mhm.
the clarity is multiplied by people to give you performance. It's not plus people. So the formula is actually quite important, that it's not clarity plus people equals performance. It's clarity multiplied, because if you don't have clarity, it doesn't matter how good your people are. It's like zero multiplied by one is zero. So the whole piece then also is that if you have clarity, but you don't have the right people doing the right things in the right way, and that they're engaged and totally for what it is that you want to achieve, then you won't get the performance either. So they're really critical. We try to bring it down to the essence of what's most important. Get the clarity right, get the people right, and you will get performance.
Mhm. And how do leaders unintentionally create confusion even when they think they're being clear?
That's a good question. Well, over the years, a lot of it happens through understanding that it's a lack of clarity in the leadership team can lead to mixed messages in different teams. So maybe there's a conversation at board level or at director level, and some of the teams come away thinking that a particular item was discussed and others weren't, and other teams may have a different story or a different understanding. So there's the lack of clarity either comes from a lack of clear expression of what's required, that from a job, from a team, or from a business as a whole, or mixed messages. So one person saying one thing and another person saying another thing, or a simple lack of communication and answers to questions that are pertinent to people being successful in their jobs.
Mhm. From the neuroscience perspective, like what does neuroscience tell us about how our brains respond to clarity or the lack of it?
Okay, that's also very interesting. So, in order to make sense of the world, our brain is a prediction machine. It's constantly predicting what's going to happen next. It wants to know what's going to happen in the next few minutes, what's going to happen in the next few hours, and it really wants to know what's going to happen in sort of the next few days. So
Mhm.
that further afield is also good, but basically the brain is just trying to figure out what's going to help survive the next hours and days, really, on a very simple level. So
Mhm.
it needs to know what's going to happen next. Without that, it'll begin to make up stuff. And what will often happen is where there's uncertainty, the brain begins to get fearful. And once the brain gets fearful, it triggers the amygdala, which is the memory of all bad things that have ever happened in our lives, any threat response, which will often put us into a place where we don't feel very resourceful. So when the adrenaline kicks in from the amygdala and it begins to interfere with our ability to think properly. So it makes us have tunnel vision. So we see things very narrowly. We don't see the big picture. It has us have accidental connections in our brains. And that's really interesting because there's loads of thoughts going through our brains. So all the listeners now, for example, have a myriad of different thoughts going through their brains according to what's important to them, where they're at, what their experiences have been. And sometimes there are accidental connections in our brain where two thoughts happen at the same time. When we're stressed, those two thoughts, our brain gives them meaning, but with a pessimistic bias. So they think that things are going to go wrong. So it'll pick thought A and thought B and go, okay, these are important and maybe something bad will happen because these are both important. When in fact, that might not A, be important, and B, something bad might not happen at all. So our brain is highly sensitive, especially when we're stressed and we have a lot of adrenaline and cortisol in our bodies, that it begins to get this narrow focus and pessimistic bias that we really need to be careful of and mindful of in order to be able to calm down enough and go like, oh, what's really going on here? So to answer your question, what we really need is a reward response where the brain opens up, it gets a bit of dopamine, it gets a little bit of excitement about the potential of a reward, and then people can go like, oh, this is going to happen next. That's exciting. I've now got energy for it. But what also
Mm.
happens to the brain then is that the prefrontal cortex that's more, you get more access to your prefrontal cortex, which I need to maybe remind listeners is all about understanding, memorizing, recalling, decision making, and inhibiting. And I think that a lot of people misjudge or fail to realize just how important our ability to inhibit is. And it only comes from our prefrontal cortex. So if we lose access to our prefrontal cortex, we can't inhibit negative thoughts. We can't inhibit impulses to say stuff that might be inappropriate just because we're a bit fired up. So there's a lot of behaviors that we're constantly needing to moderate, especially in the workplace. And if we're stressed, all that inhibition goes out the window and we get very inappropriate behaviors, which then have inappropriate consequences and it can very rapidly spiral out of control. So back to the wanting to really connect with the reward center in our brains, produce that excitement and that enthusiasm for a potential reward, releases a lot of energy, helps us see the bigger picture, and also allows us to make useful creative connections, especially when it comes to problem solving. So we can go like, oh, wait a second, there's a subtle thought about A and a subtle thought about B and an even more subtle thought about C. Maybe we need to bring C to the front a little bit and discuss that option because there might be some richness in it. If
Mm.
we're stressed, A and B, we'll put them together and go like, oh, that probably won't work because we'll be just looking for the negative or the things that won't happen. The negative bias will take over. I don't know. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that answers a lot of questions. I mean,
Okay,
you're known for your ability to connect brain science with behavior change.
right.
But most leaders think behavior change is about training, reminders, or motivation. But
Yeah.
neuroscience says something very different.
Yes.
So, so why do so many change initiatives fail? Or maybe what are the biggest misconceptions leaders have about behavioral change?
It's really interesting. The change is a massive subject, and it's been studied for many years, and there are thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of books about it. But to try and bring it into some sort of sense for this conversation, it's really useful to look at the distinction between change, which is a moment in time, and transition into what the new behaviors need to be.
Mm.
Because you can make a decision, we're going to change the structure of this department, or we're going to um, have a new system in place. So the change happens, and that happens often quite quickly. But it's the transition into the new way of working, the new systems that need to be adopted, the new behaviors that need to be adopted can take a lot of time. And whenever there's a change in a leadership team, like a change of personnel or a change of the leader of the leadership team, especially, that can often be a bit of a shock to the team that a lot of people underestimate. And it's all about being able to, again, as quickly as possible, find common ground, common purpose, and common goal that everyone can align themselves around to say, it's okay, we're going to be working towards this common goal. And therefore, any disruption or any discomfort is worth the effort. Because unless we can see that the reward after any change is worth the discomfort of the change, because any change is uncomfortable, the brain hates change, and move into that transition through the upsets, the difficulties, the learning, right? The feeling ignorant, the feeling incompetent that may can happen when we go to, especially with a new system, with technology. We have to overcome that, allow those feelings to be there, acknowledge and recognize those feelings, discuss them, and then move on. But there's a nice model by a guy called Williams Bridges, who's put together a very nice number of nice models. But one that we particularly like is a notion that the leaders often know that the change is going to happen. They've been planning it for months, if not years. And then when the change happens, they're going like, right, finally, we're there. We've done this thing. But for a lot of people, it's often this like newness to it. Like, oh, now it's like they've only had a week's notice or a day's notice or sometimes less. And they are still only beginning the change journey. So the leaders are often weeks, if not months ahead in that process of adapting or wanting the new change. And they can see the rewards, but they can't necessarily see all the difficulties or challenges.
Mm.
And some people will go like, I don't like this. This is worse for me. I'm now sort of stressed, or oh, my comfort is gone. I don't see the reward of the benefits. The things they say are going to get better or worse for me. And some people may then choose to leave. But it's this transition piece because when we go through change, we have to. It's nice. Another way of looking at it is these days, it's not necessarily the most intelligent people who are going to succeed or the most knowledgeable people, even. It's the ones who can rapidly learn, unlearn, and relearn. And this
Mm.
change is also really important with regard this model is also really important with regards to change because when I change a new technology or a new way of doing something, I have to unlearn all the old ways. I have to sort of let them go, and all the brain wiring that had me be competent, fast, efficient is disrupted. And I go, now it's not fast, it's not efficient, it's not comfortable. So I have to put in huge amounts of effort, which can be very exhausting and very stressful. So unless we're taking in what's going on in people's brains to help make these transitions easier by having conversations about what needs to be let go of, and almost a bit of like grieving for the old ways of doing things, and allow those conversations to take place so that the brain and the brains of everyone in the team can go, okay, this is change. We're moving on. We're letting go of that. And we like that bit, but we can see, yeah, that is old fashioned and see the new reasoning, understand the new reasoning for doing something, and come to terms with the fact that that is actually better in the long run and therefore worth the effort to make the change.
Hmm. It seems like a lot of work, and it's so.
It is a lot of work. And that's why it's so difficult, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Changing systems is difficult. I don't know if you've ever tried changing behavior yourself
yes.
on a personal level, right? Because unless we can set things up that to make it easy in the first place, make it obvious that the change is required. I mean, one of the great books that I love is a book called Atomic Habits,
Hmm.
because James Clear has written a fantastic book and he breaks habits down into atomic particles because he says the smaller the change you can make, the easier you will change in the long run because you get this accumulation of gains and then they all build on one another so that you actually get an exponential curve after a while. But anybody, for example, going to the gym wants to say, okay, on January, I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to get strong, I'm going to have a couple of goals. We might be doing their exercises for 3, 4, 5, maybe even 6 months before their expectations are met, let alone exceeded. But
Mm.
shortly after that, because it's an exponential curve, it goes very flat for a long time. No change, no change. Yet we expect change to go like this, but it doesn't. It goes very, very small, 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 and then it ticks up. When it ticks up, if you got the persistence, come September, October, after your year of training, you'll probably notice some quite significant changes. It may even exceed your expectations because you're getting that accumulation of gain, that sort of pounding of gains. And it's
Hmm.
a great example that change takes time. For that newness to come in, it's often difficult, it's often inefficient, it's often slower, it's often stressful. And unless we can all come together to recognize that that's just part of it, it's not that the system is bad, it's that the change just takes time. That eventually then you move on and get into the exponential growth bit at the other end where your expectations are exceeded.
You spent the past years deeply involved with employee-owned organizations in UK. You even just came back from the Employee Ownership Association conference and your business partner published a book about it. What
Correct.
exactly is an ownership culture? Can you tell us?
It's really good. So we've got a number of clients over the years. We've had lots. We specialize in working with small and medium-sized businesses, ideally around 50 to 500 staff. And we work directly with the leadership teams to see how they can help change. And a couple of them over the last few years have moved to an employee ownership model, which means that the original owners, instead of selling the business to a big corporate or another investment firm or something that wants to just say, okay, we're going to buy this business and then we want a return on our investment as soon as possible, cut costs, strip out anything that seems to be superfluous to try and maximize profit so that they can get a return on their investment. A lot of owners going, we don't really want that to happen to our business. What we want is for the employees, who are a great team of people, to actually reap the benefits of their own efforts. So then what happens is you can set up in the UK at least, there's a number of tax efficient mechanisms where the owners have a buyout period. And then after a period of years, the owners get their money out of the business from the profits. And the employees are then the owners of the business.
Hmm.
And that means that they can then share in any of the profits. So
Hmm.
that's part of it. But that's maybe the structural part of ownership. But what really makes it work, and we've seen also there are examples where it hasn't worked properly because these fundamentals weren't addressed, is that all employees need to have a sense of understanding what it is to run a business. There are profits, that there are losses, that there are investments, there are capital expenditures, there's day to day expenditures. The whole notion of where is the money made, where is the value, I should say, where is the value added, customers, our clients, that generates the income. And then what happens to that income and how is that proportioned to investment for improving the efficiency of the business and rewarding the people who've worked in the business? So the first thing is ownership literacy, understanding the fundamentals of how a business works and the constraints that a business has. The next thing is having a voice, because in an employee owned business, it really only works when all of the employees get their say. It doesn't mean they get to say what happens. They don't necessarily make all the decisions, but they at least inform decisions and put forward ideas so that the people nominated to become the leaders and to make those decisions, whatever the governance structure is. Oops, I've gone a bit blurry. Whatever the governance structure is, um, that those people can make an informed decision. So the next bit is that they need to be able to think about not only what we have now as a business, but what's the future of the business? How can we create a legacy business? Because we're all employee owners now, but later on there'll be other employees who are owning this. And how can we secure this for the future? So it moves away from this short termism of let's just get a quick profit in the next 5 years and then sell the business. It's much more into like what's going to lay foundations for steady, sustainable growth into the long term future. So it's future thinking based around making decisions around your values and your purpose and being really guided by those things. So it's a very purpose driven and values driven organization usually. And the next one is collaboration for impact, which means that all teams work together and understand the constraints and pressures of other teams, because sometimes one team is particularly busy and another team isn't. My background is I was a chef, and it's often classic that there's tension between, the kitchen and the restaurant. So the restaurant team are out in the restaurant, everything's calm and relaxed and very gentle and moving slowly. Where in the kitchen it can be very frantic. And when those two meet, there can often be a lot of sparks that fly. But in all the teams I've worked with, when I was a chef, when the head chef understood and got on very well and had a good relationship with the restaurant manager, it worked really well because they ensured that there wasn't inappropriate behavior and that everyone worked together, that the restaurant understood the constraints of the kitchen, but also that the kitchen understood the constraints of the restaurant and how they need to be able to be up there with the customers, keeping the customers happy. So it's that bridging of those gaps between teams to help make that happen. So there's collaboration for impact. And then the final one is continuous growth, which is all about growth mindset, knowing that, like we were talking earlier about change, there will be change. It will be uncomfortable. I need to continue to learn and grow because then I'm going to become a better person and more valuable member of the team. But also renewal. Like what needs to happen in order for this business to stay relevant, to stay up to date, to stay ahead of technology or with technology and with what's going on in the market, stay alert to all of those things that are happening around us in order to go, right, where do we need to adapt? Where do we need to change? So those
Mhm.
5 competencies are the core of what makes a successful ownership organization, ownership culture. And it can be done in normal traditional businesses as well. And that's what we find very exciting is that it's a brilliant model for reaping the benefits of employee ownership. But it's also very, very useful to apply these principles and to use these competencies in traditional businesses as well.
Yeah, like a sense of ownership even in a regular company without changing legal structure.
Well, exactly. A lot of managers or leaders talk about, oh, we want people to become owners, have an ownership mindset, own your job, own the project. Yeah, well, that only happens when you can really educate them around what else is going on. And in
Yeah.
traditional businesses, that can be a bit tricky because there might be certain bits where the profitability of the business is being shared. And then that's not so easy. And to be honest about that, there needs to be some consideration for how much transparency you can have within a business. And I'm all for maximum transparency. But I do remember many, many years ago, I think it was in the late 1990s, I was talking to one director of a business and I was talking to him about how important it is to be transparent and to share the sort of, the constraints of the business and all that. And one of his it was a small training organization. One of his top trainers went like, oh, wow, you're making that much profit and you're paying me that much. I'm off. I'm going to do this on my own. So, it needs to be equitable. And one of the things we love about employee owned businesses is this better distribution of wealth. So it's not all concentrated at the top, it's better redistributed amongst all the employees because they're all creating value, right?
Employee owned business show 20%, 12% higher productivity and 20% higher profitability.
Right. So there's some research that's now showing that when you get this machine working well and you have all those bits like the ownership literacy, the voice and influence from the teams, that long term projection of into the future being value based around your decision making, collaboration across departments, and always looking at the impact and that continuous growth and agility to be able to, learn and grow as the environment changes that is proving to show a 12% increase in productivity compared to a benchmark of other traditional businesses and a
Mhm.
25% increase in profitability. But we do need a lot more research on this. We really need to get and popularize how effective this whole way of thinking is. But at the moment, we're still needing to get some more research. So is there anybody out there who's doing a master's or a PhD get in touch because we'd love to talk to you about how we can get more research about this.
One of the things you said in our pre-call was powerful for me. Leaders need to think more like coaches, more asking, less telling. Why is a
Right.
coaching mindset essential for modern leadership?
That's another really interesting topic. In fact, I was with a client only last week and we were talking about this in great detail. In that, the way to think about it is who's doing the thinking. And a lot of the time, leaders and managers tend to be like, I'm now the manager. I need to do all the thinking. I need to have all the answers. Where in fact, it's often the people on the front line doing the job, interacting directly with customers who have the answers. So rather than saying, I think we should do this, is asking more, what should we do? And what thoughts do you have about how we should implement this change? What are the implications of this change that needs to be implemented? How can we work together to minimize the stresses and maximize the benefits? And even when giving feedback, we like to use the ask, tell, ask approach. So we train a lot of managers in that, which is, first of all, how do you think you're doing? So, how did the last podcast go? What were the stats that allowed you to think it was successful? And then, if there's something where, from what you've said about your performance, that I can say, oh, I can see you haven't thought about something, then I could, okay, you might want to consider this and this, or have you considered this, or have you thought about that? So I'm sort of guiding some new information that might be a blind spot.
Mhm.
And even saying and telling some information if it's a blind spot that I think, right, I'm not going to ask you to guess this, I'm just going to tell you. But then, rather than leaving it at that, say, okay, now what are you going to do to improve? What are you going to do better next time based on your own assessment and self analysis of what happened before and the new information that we've now shared? And what are you now going to do? What does your brain say should happen next? And work through that together, because that's really powerful to get them into the driver's seat, because they're making choices and they're being able to express themselves.
And how this connect to behavior change?
Well, when we're told what to do, we often resist. When we decide ourselves what to do, we have a different level of intrinsic motivation to want to do it for ourselves, to become better or to get a particular reward.
Mhm.
So, modern leadership is all about tapping into that inner drive, and comes all the way back to where we started the conversation about clarity. Because I want to know, for example, um, when I believe I asked you in the pre-call to this podcast meeting, what's the purpose, right? What are you trying to achieve, and who are your audience, and what do they want and need, and what's your vision of success, and what's most important to you as we go through the journey? Because that then can feed us into, okay, what's the sort of topics that we need to discuss and the strategy we need to have as we go through this bit of the conversation. Because without that purpose, clarity of vision, what success looks like, clarity of values, what sort of behaviors do we want, what's most important to discuss or how to behave, and then from that build a strategy. That's where the clarity comes in, to be able to go, okay, this is what we need to do, these are the steps we need to take, this is the direction we're going to travel in over the next longer term, and then build that down into plans that get executed on a basis of individuals fulfilling specific roles or specific objectives.
Then
I
the
went off on a tangent there, so I don't know if you need to bring us back. Did that answer your question?
yeah. And for the leaders listening, what are the first three skills a leader should develop if they want to adopt a coaching mindset?
Oh, be totally open to being coached yourself. That's
Okay.
absolutely the first one, right? You need to be self-aware, know your own foibles, know your own brain and the sort of things that you have, the biases that you naturally have. So to really be self-aware, and you can do that through a number of different ways. Have a coach yourself, of course, is a great way to do that. Read some books on self-awareness, maybe do some psychometrics and to help you understand and get a better understanding of your own behavioral tendencies. And
Mm-hmm.
we always do that with a lot of our leaders, especially when we do a coaching program. We use behavior analytics rather than personality testing, because the behavior analytics let us see what's current now. What are your current preferences and behaviors? And that often illustrates some strengths, which are great. Play to those strengths, keep that stuff. But here, maybe there are a couple of blind spots that you can boost and learn to develop underutilized behaviors that will bring and turbocharge your strengths even more. Right? They'll bring more energy and more balance to your strengths or your strong traits, let's say. Just for example, if you have frankness, some people say frank is really good. I can be really honest. I can be really straight. People know where they stand. However, that can also, for some people, be rather blunt.
Mm-hmm.
Where other people say, no, diplomacy is really important. You need to always be respectful and tactful in the way that you speak with people. But for some people, that can be a lot of words without a clear message. And they go like, what are you trying to hide? Are you trying to manipulate me in some way or other? So what we really need is both of these things together, frankness and diplomacy, so that we can be forthright, direct, and to the point to get the message across. We can also think about the way that we're saying it and who we're saying it to be respectful of their feelings and their situation, so that we're also diplomatic. And that gives us what we call forthright diplomacy. So it's not diplomacy by itself, it's not frankness by itself, it's both of these things together. And in fact, we've got a model that helps us understand 12 behavioral paradoxes developed by Dr. Dan Harrison that gives great self-awareness to leaders and teams to see where they are, where their biases are, and most importantly, specific things they can do to improve their effectiveness as a leader.
Mm. You're deeply practical. You use behavioral analytics, neuroscience, diagnostic, all to help leaders make better decisions. Yeah. Tell me, what patterns do you see in high performing versus low performing organizations?
Good question. It's often unchallenged, inappropriate behavior that destroys teams more rapidly than anything else. But let's go back to the beginning though. Good teams have clarity of purpose. They know what success looks like. They agree on what good behavior is and what they value as a team. And they have a plan or a strategy that they know what they're doing and how to get there. And everybody has clear roles and defined responsibilities so that there's clarity of, I know what I'm doing and how I contribute to my job, my team, and the business as a whole. That's fundamental. Without that, it can get very messy very quickly, as we've discussed. But then the next piece is, am I being developed and trained to do the job I do so that I'm optimizing my energy and efforts and have the skills to deal with the challenges that I'm facing? Because if I'm too challenged, I'm going to get stressed. If I'm not challenged enough for my skill set, I'm going to get bored. And
Yeah.
then my mind will wander and I won't be effective or I'll become complacent. Um, and then also to make sure that for anybody who's doing the team contributor is trained to do the job that they need to do, but also once they become a manager, that they're trained how to manage and they're trained in the fundamental principles of management. And once they become a leader, that they understand the development required for a leadership mindset, for a bigger picture overview, and above all, to let go because you're doing less and you're thinking more, and how to delegate effectively. Otherwise, you carry on, and managers have this as well. Often people promoted to manager roles carry on doing what they used to do, but now they're also responsible for managing the team. And sometimes it's because they don't have a mini me. So if I'm promoted, I don't have a little David who can do all the things that I could do when I was in that role at a very high level. So again, we need to always think about helping managers to not only delegate, but to build a team underneath them who they can delegate to. Otherwise, they won't be effective as managers. And the same for leaders. So the succession planning piece is absolutely critical to any business. But that comes with some risks because if you've got quite a stable business and then people are promoted, but they don't then move on, they stay in those roles for very many, many years, you have lots of people who go like, I want to be promoted. I'm here now 3-4 years and I want to get to being a manager role. And you have to admit that sometimes you're going to lose those people because you don't have a place for them, sadly. But I always say, have that conversation. Way back when I was employed, learning and development manager at the Waldorf Hotel, had a great manager, and she regularly said to me, "So, are you looking for jobs?" And I go like, "No," and she'd go like, "I want you looking for jobs. I want you looking at what's out there and comparing that to what you got here, so that you know you're staying here because of a choice, not because you feel trapped or anything like that." And I always felt like, oh, okay, she was this personnel manager. I go like, that's a bit of a head spin. But I've always had that mindset that I want people to be choosing to be there rather than complaining. And I want them to see that there's reward in staying. But if then they go like, actually, there isn't any reward in staying, let's have a chat with the manager about that so that we can have a managed exit, a managed departure, and that there's hopefully a handover period and that they can recruit properly for the role and all those kinds of things. Because again, it's back to change, right? And transitioning. And the more transparent you can be, the better. And I know it's tricky, it's not always easy, but I'm always erring on let's aim for and have a value of maximum transparency to get best understanding, to be able to make the transition easy. So there's no surprises, right?
Mhm. David, you've been doing this for 20 plus years. What's a
Yeah.
story that's changed how you think about leadership or people development?
Any particular story? I mean, there's so many, but it's always rewarding to see someone progress through that evolution of individual contrib because I've been with a lot of businesses and we often have clients for many, many years. I've seen people come in, recruitment, like, oh, this is all new and exciting and intense, and then become really good at their job and then have an opportunity to actually manage and support other people and become really good at that understanding the delegation, understanding the stuff that they need to do and that others can do, and be willing to have the patience and emotional intelligence to train others who are not the same as them, right? So okay, for this person, I need to be training them in this way and explaining in this way, and another person I can say, explain it in a slightly different way. So having that flexibility of thinking and behavior, to be able to have other people in the team who they can delegate to, and then making that step up from managing others into leadership, where now they're managing managers, because it's a completely different thing to manage managers than it is to manage individual contributors. And to go through that, I've seen now a number of people over the years go through those transitions. And it's not always been a smooth journey, but when they can do it and they know that there's a mind shift change at every level, and they're now running very successful businesses as part of the leadership team, and in some cases, owners of the business, which is very exciting. And I've always been most excited to be able to see that journey of evolution and progression, where they're no longer doing the thing that they originally thought they were going to be doing. So as a chef, back to my days as a chef, you'd learn the cooking and you'd learn the skill of cooking and you'd learn all about how to cook and how to organize yourself in a kitchen. But then you begin managing a team of people doing that. And then you begin to manage a number of different sections or teams in the kitchen to be able to do that. And then eventually you get above that, where you're now more dealing with all the mechanisms of the business, right? And the development of menus and the development of systems in order to be able to do that. And you're not really cooking on the stoves anymore. So all of this leadership progression is a letting go
Mhm.
and a real. So it's unlearning and relearning all the way.
Mhm. Can you tell me what are three practical actions a leader or coach can take tomorrow to create more clarity, better behavior change, or more ownership in their team?
Just three. There's a lot of stuff there.
Like for
I would say
tomorrow, for tomorrow.
for tomorrow. Okay, is the tomorrow? I would say then the first thing to be doing is really asking yourself some of those questions of what does success look like. It all begins with what does success look like, so that you have a clear idea around what you're aiming for and what you're trying to do. Because a lot comes from that. Then your brain begins to go, okay, if that's the case, then tomorrow I need to be prioritizing this over this, right? Rather than going like just being busy, it's like, no, is this busyness helping me to get to my vision of aims and objectives? Is it helping me to fulfill my purpose? Am I aligned to what's most important to me? Because that releases huge amounts of energy. So get really clear on what success looks like would be a first step. And even if that's tomorrow, what do I want to have achieved by end of the day tomorrow? So that's, you walk into tomorrow, come to your desk and go, right, I know that there's one thing that I really need to achieve today. Everything else can be sort of set aside to the degree that I get that done. And it was really interesting as an example of that with Ali writing the book. I mean, she wrote it in record time because she had a goal and a very clear goal. And then we worked around helping her to be able to do that so that she had the brain power to do that, because that was the highest priority.
Mhm.
Um, you want the three things. Um, so you said three things. There was leadership, but also for a coach. For a coach, I would say tomorrow is think more about yourself as a business rather than as a coach. I think
Mhm.
far too many coaches, and I went through this phase myself where, oh, I need to get better skills. Oh, I'll go on that workshop because I need to get better skills. But when I got my coach and I set up my business in 2013, in 2004. Gosh, 2004, going back a few years now. I had a coach for 4 years, and he helped me set up business because it wasn't about skill development because I was a good coach. It was about business development and understanding that if you're a coach and you're an independent coach, you need to have a business. So you need to be dedicating at least, you know, 20%, if not 40% of your time to business development, because otherwise you don't have a business. And delegating as much as you can to virtual assistants and kind of thing, so that you're trying to keep yourself clear for the delivery of the service, which you're excellent at, but knowing that that is actually a business. It's no longer you just being a coach. It's really much you being a business person and a business owner.
Thank you very much, David. This was incredibly insightful. Thank you for sharing decades of knowledge, clarity, behavior change, brain science, ownership culture, all in one conversation. I think we can make two more and
Easily.
easily. Yeah. Can you tell me at the end where can people find you, your articles, and the new book, The Power of Ownership Culture?
Great. So the book is available. Ali's book is available on Amazon. The Power of an Ownership Culture. Ali Gibbons. So search on those two terms. And our website is Talent for Performance, with the four being the number four. So it's the word talent and the number four, and then performance.co.uk. We're based in the UK. There are lots of resources there. In fact, there's guides on everything you need from everything we've been talking about with regards to clarifying your purpose, understanding your vision and writing your vision, developing and helping you to understand your values and your strategy. And then we got 16 guides there for all elements of business. And I've only really scratched the surface by talking about business strategy. But there are also then we've got the employee ownership page, which now has a number of resources, including access to Ali's book and the assessment tools that we use. So we use behavioral assessments, and we use which measures people's potential to be employee owners or to develop an ownership culture. It's not only for employee ownership, it's about ownership culture. But also we have a very robust methodology for being able to measure what's actually happening on the ground. So it's not opinion, it's not an engagement survey of, oh, how do people feel and what do they think? It's like, am I seeing evidence of X, Y, Z happening? Am I seeing evidence of my colleagues speaking up and managers listening and getting back to us so there's a clear feedback loop? Things like that. So that measures on the ground in very robust terms where the business is at, so that you can say, okay, where are the gaps? And then with regards to the potential side, using Harrison Analytics, you've got the psychometric behavior analytics there as well. So that's all. There's all information about that on our website, Talent for Performance. And also connect with me on LinkedIn. Mention the podcast. I'm David Klaasen on LinkedIn, and so please just search me out. There's a couple of David Klaasens, but you should find me, based in the UK. I'm happy to share and connect on LinkedIn because I regularly post on LinkedIn as well.
David, thank you for being my guest.
Elevate yourself. Empower others. Welcome to Coach Approach Podcast.